Hi everybody, I'm Mike, and this is Mike Tries Motorsports, the only show on YouTube that generates enough downforce to be viewed upside down. Try it. Turn your monitor upside down. I won't fall on the floor. On today's episode, we have some work to do in the garage studio. I'll hand it over to Garage Studio Mike for the full intro. Thanks for the introduction, Basement Studio Mike. Welcome to the Garage Studio. If you probably noticed I was pulling the Audi into the garage just a few minutes ago. We have some more work to do to the car. First, you may have noticed that I got a package in the mail today. I have 2 sets of brake pads for the car now to address the braking issues we had at Summit Point Raceway. I have EBC Blue Stuff NDX for the front axle of the car and EBC Yellow Stuff for the rear. Why do I have 2 different compounds? That's a great question. Well, if you recall, the front brake calipers on this car are from a Porsche Boxster. So when I buy front brakes for the car, I need to tell all the systems that I'm buying brakes from that I have a Porsche Boxster. The rear axle of the car is stock, it's unmodified. So for those systems, I tell the system that I have an Audi A4. Now, why did I end up with blue and yellow? Well, for the Audi A4 OEM braking system, there simply is no Blue Stuff NDX pad available. Why does it matter? Well, the Blue Stuff NDX pads and the Yellow Stuff pads have basically, or identical, basically the same temperature range of operation. They both work well at freezing temperatures and up to 900 degrees Celsius. The difference is that I believe the Blue Stuff NDX pads are formulated for heavier weight cars. The Audi would burn through Yellow Stuff pads more rapidly. I'm not sure exactly why. Anyway, if I could have gotten Blue Stuff NDX for both axles, I would have done that. This should be fine. And if I need to fine tune the brake balance of the car, I can always try a different set of pads on the front or rear. So we'll have to baseline this, see how it goes. Anyway, why are we in the garage tonight though? It's not really for the pads. It was scheduled to be for the pads. However, there's an issue with the car. I have an AMB engine code car. As I understand, the AMB heads are prone to cracking. And what happens is you develop these hairline cracks between the intake valves, and coolant is allowed to rush into the engine or seep into the engine, which causes a couple things. You'll see smoke on startup. You'll have difficulty starting the car, it'll have a rough idle, and your coolant will just disappear. It won't appear to be leaking out anywhere, it'll just be disappearing while it's going into the engine, into the combustion chamber. It's not mixing with the oil as far as I can tell. The oil looks completely fine. I will drain the oil and check it and then just change it as part of this process, but what I'm probably going to do is take the top end of the engine off, replace the head gasket, and I'll inspect the head. If the head needs to be replaced, then so be it. I'll burn that bridge when I get there. But for now, I do think the other reason that it could be disappearing coolant like this, all of those symptoms I described a minute ago, could just be caused by a head gasket. Well, to get to the head gasket, I have to remove the head anyway. So we're going to be doing some work. We're going to check out that head. I may get it machined. And hey, while we're in there, since I believe we're building the car to SCCA's STU classification, there may be some additional modifications that we want to do while we have access to the turbocharger. The car has 180,000 miles on it. That may be the original turbo. And they don't last forever. So this may be an opportunity to either buy or refresh the KO3 that's in there, or upgrade to a KO4, which is allowed by the rules. I believe I just need to run an inlet restrictor, or and then match the weight of the car to that inlet restrictor. So we'll see how it goes. So there's nothing to it but to do it. Back to you, Basement Studio Mike. Thanks, Garage Studio Mike. Let's start with the teardown. Oh, and while we're at it, I want to thank everybody who's been watching and following along with me as I learned how to make videos, how to tear apart engines, and maybe how to go a little faster. We've acquired a few subscribers over time, and that really helps. So I want to thank you all for subscribing and sticking around with us. Anyway, listen to some music, sit back, and enjoy the rest of the episode. Okay, so you've seen me place the car into the service position. That's what I'm calling it, at least. I've heard it called that before. It's basically when you unbolt the radiator core support and you slide it forward. Maybe you're supposed to remove it completely. I don't think we're going to have to do that for this job. I did in episode 2, I think it was episode 2, where I changed the timing belt and water pump. Well, we basically got to redo a lot of that all over again. If you recall, there were two very long bolts. What that came out of this part, I'm going to call it the crash bar. One out of each side, and I used one of these bolts on this side and one on the other to extend how far this this structure could be pulled away from the car. I removed 1-inch long bolts and replaced them with this 3-inch long bolt, and that allows me to pull the bumper away from the car approximately 2 inches. And that gives me all the room that I need to work, pull off the serpentine belt, and eventually, probably, the timing belt again. So, I should probably unbolt that. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing here, and put you back in time lapse. I think the next steps are to remove all of the wiring on the top of the engine, any of these coolant pipes that are going to be in our way, some of the air lines that are on the side here. Basically anything that's going to prevent us from lifting the head off. Also, luckily in the back of this car is just an absolute maze of pipes and plumbing, and we get to go back there blind. So we can't see anything, is my guess, and it's just going to be a pain in the caboose. So that's good. Yeah, and I think while we're at it, we'll pull the fuel injectors off and we'll take a look at those. We may be putting larger fuel injectors on the car in order to handle more power. So if we turn up boost pressure at the turbocharger, we're going to need more fuel, and after a certain point, these injectors just won't be able to provide that. If they're old and dirty and worn out, I might as well replace them with larger injectors. Well, let's see what else is there. I'm quite sure I'm going to have to drain whatever coolant remains in here again. And I can do that from the bottom of the radiator at the temperature sensor. I'll be careful not to spill coolant all over myself this time. It turns out that I didn't have the right tools to get the head off that first night, so I had to order a new Audi head bolt socket. I returned home from the office one evening to find a package waiting for me. I'll let Garage Studio Mike talk about what we got. Take it away, Garage Studio Mike. Okay, thanks for the introduction, Basement Mike. So what do we have here today? Well, first up, this is the most important thing. This is what we're doing on this project right now. I have here a complete gasket sealing kit. And that includes, by the way, the valve cover gasket, a new valve cover gasket. I know I just put a new one on there, but I've got a new one here. I'm going to use it. I have water seals. I have, I'm not sure what this one is yet. We'll have to figure it out. But the most important thing, the star of the show here is that head gasket. So I'm going to clean up some workspace here. I'll show you what else I got in this box. All right, first, this is the snub nose bushing. I'll show you exactly where this goes in a minute. It'll go at the front of the engine. It's the one that's on there is disintegrating. This is, what do they call that? I think it's, the cylinder head cooling flange. It's written right there. This is a part that commonly cracks on these cars. It sits at the back of the cylinder head. It's a pain in the butt to get to. It already comes with the new O-ring. But yeah, when these things crack, they start to leak coolant. So I don't know if that's an issue, but I'm going to replace it anyway. You get a coolant temperature sensor that'll go in there, and a couple of hoses that'll plug into it, and it goes onto the back of the cylinder head. I have to remove this anyway when I take the head off, so why not get a new one? And in here, we've got a whole bunch of hardware, including the bolts for the turbocharger. There are 3 of those, and I think the rest of this should just be the cylinder head bolts. I've got brand new cylinder head bolts. They're the OEM Audi type bolts. They're not ARP. I could not get ARP bolts, and I could not get ARP studs. Every place I looked was back ordered for those. I don't know if they're not making them anymore, or if there's just a supply chain issue that's holding all of that up. But at the power levels I'm probably going to be making with this car, at least for now, the stock bolts should be just fine. When I go on and look at putting a larger turbocharger on the car, I'll have to take a lot of this stuff off anyway. So putting in a set of ARP studs or bolts at that time shouldn't be a problem. Let me show you where this little thing goes. This is probably going to be the easiest thing to do. The old one is almost off as it is. Try not to mind that cricket. It's really kind of annoying. Sorry about that. So here we are in the engine bay. You can actually already see the snub nose thing down there. It's that little nub right there at the bottom. When you apply torque to this engine, the engine wants to twist along its, the longitudinal axis. But since we have an all-wheel drive drivetrain, the transmission, which is attached to the engine, wants to, I suppose, rotate this direction, pushing the bottom of the engine forward, trying to rock it back. I think that's what's going on anyway. So that little puck down there pushes into this little receiver plate here. I actually don't know what any of this stuff is called. And that basically stops that arrests that movement. However, right now, you can see this thing is kind of crummy looking. That exposed bit of foam there was exposed simply because I ran my finger through it. So I'm going to try to push the front bumper of the car away a little bit more. That's pretty easy. I've got some play there. And I'm simply going to try to pop the new bushing on there. If I have to, there are 3 bolts that take the bracket off of that. You can kind of see it there. That'll simply come off looks really easy. And I'll clean that thing up and I'll stick the new one on and I'll just bolt it back together. So I'll probably start there. And then I'll continue with getting the rest of the turbocharger manifold bolts out. There's one in the back there. I've been soaking these in PB Blaster. You should do the same. And that'll finish this side of the head. I've got to get this oil line off right here. All of the components on the back of the cylinder head here. That might be the diverter valve, I'm not sure. And then I've got to get fuel injector bolts. Oh, this is a water line. And I've got to get these 10 intake manifold bolts and actually nuts. Now there's a nut down here and there's one in the back as well. That way there's two studs that you can sort of rest the intake manifold on so you can get the bolts started. Now I'll probably have to take this thing out, which is easy since it's broken. And that should be pretty much the rest of the disassembly I need to do before I pull out the head bolt. I'm hoping this is an AMB head, as you can see here. There's nothing inherently wrong with the AMB head, but they do have a tendency, as I've seen, to crack. Cracked head would be bad. If it's cracking, then it could be letting coolant that flows through the inside of the head into the cylinder, and that could be causing the difficulties that I've had starting the car. I sincerely hope that's not it. I really hope I get in and I just find a blown head gasket and we can just move on with our lives. But what I'll probably do anyway is I'll get this head tested and machined because it's off. I might as well make sure it's flat. And I'll have whatever shop does that look for cracks. If there are no cracks that are obviously visible, then I will have all of those things done. If I find a crack or two in the head, then it's trash and I'll have to pull the cams and I'll see if I can get another head. There are other head codes that should fit this car. I've done a little bit of research. I can't remember what any of the codes are. It doesn't matter at this point. They're essentially the same in most cases. Some of them, for you Audi A4 owners and Volkswagen owners out there, there are a couple different codes, or at least one that has larger ports. So you will have to change your intake manifold if you change to that head. I don't know what the benefits of it are. I mean, it would seem like larger ports would allow air to flow better, right? But I'm not sure about all that. I don't have enough know-how when it comes to forced induction yet to really answer that. So at our power levels, though, it really shouldn't matter. There's one more thing I wanted to show you before we get working on the car, and that's the fuel injectors. These came off pretty easily. There's actually just two bolts that hold them on. But if you take a close look at them, they are really, really filthy. Now, they came out of these ports. I mean, look, these things are, first of all, they're damp. I'm not sure why, but it would seem to me that fuel is getting past these O-rings here and spraying out of the manifold. And maybe that happens because there's pressure inside the manifold, high pressure, right? 8 or 9 PSI, something like that. And maybe that blows the fuel out over time. Some of them are drier than others. It's cylinders 2 and 3 here that seem to be the worst of the ports. Interestingly enough, you can also see down inside the ports there. If I stick a borescope down there, you can actually see the 3 intake valves per cylinder, which is pretty cool. So yeah, these are the 2 dirtiest ones right here. And they're really gunked up. I haven't taken time to clean them yet because I wanted to show you. You see how wet they are? Now, the most important part of the fuel injectors, I suppose, is the nozzle. There it is in focus there. And I suppose that looks clean enough, but you can never really tell. Or does it look clean? Oh, sorry, the light's reflecting back from the light on the phone. See, I suspected that these weren't closing all the way. Oh, man, it's really hard to get that in focus. There we go. Maybe there was some debris inside the injector there. And my original suspicion, and the reason I didn't replace the head gasket right away, is that the car had sat for some time. 1 or 2 or more of these things clogged, wouldn't close all the way. And while the car sat, it would slowly bleed the high pressure fuel out of the lines into these ports and into the cylinders. And then when I would start the car, it would be flooded. which would cause it to run rough. Well, at least 2 cylinders would be flooded, which would cause it to run rough and emit some sort of whitish or maybe bluish white smoke. To be honest, I'm not sure of the color of the smoke. It's hard to tell, you know, through the super dark windows. That was my theory. I'm not sure if it's true. I'm going to be looking at replacing these with, well, I have to find out what they are first. I'm not sure if these are the OEM fuel injectors, if these are the ones that came with the car, or if they are modified. If they're modified, I'd be interested in getting them cleaned up and working. Well, at least know. I would be at least interested in knowing that they're working at 100%. But if not, I'd like to put larger fuel injectors on it. That way I can, in the future, turn up the boost, make some more horsepower. This episode is getting a little long, so I'm going to end the episode here. The project was long and arduous, and I'm actually not finished yet. So in the next episode, we'll be taking the head off and hopefully getting the car back together and then taking it for its first drive. Until then, thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you're interested in what we're doing here. I'm Mike, and this has been Mike Tries Motorsports. Keep it shiny side up, and I'll see you in the next one. So if you are the packaging engineer at Husky who designed this product right here for holding on the socket extensions that people buy, you know, when they're in the store, they're sort of attached like this, and you have to pull them off. You know, maybe you can do better. Like, they should eventually come off, right? I shouldn't have to dig inside of this thing for 35 minutes trying to get that little lump of plastic out of there. Yeah, I'm not really sure how that's going to come out. And I'm not really sure why it's stuck in there so hard. So, yeah, thanks, Husky. I'll just be here, you know, with my needle nose pliers, trying to get this thing unstuck.